Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I've never been the kind of guy to tell stories. At least, not the kind you'd want to hear late at night. I worked mountain patrol for over a decade, first in Jackson Hole, then Breckenridge, and for the last 3 years at Summit Peak Ski Resort in Colorado. It's not the biggest or the most famous, but it's remote, well-funded, and caters to wealthy tourists who don't like crowds. We were prepared for anything. Avalanches, frostbite, lost kids, the occasional helicopter evac. But this was never part of the handbook. My name's Scott Halperin. I'm 41, former Army medic, divorced. I moved out here after leaving Denver behind. I liked the silence, the way the snow muffles everything like the whole world's holding its breath. For a while, this place gave me some peace. I was in charge of the upper ridgeline patrols, avalanche mitigation, and rescue ops in the North Basin. I first heard about the infection on the morning of January 11th. The local radio station, KBKX out of Frisco, played an emergency broadcast from the CDC. It sounded like a test. Something about a pathogenic event near Boulder, still under control, nothing to panic about. We've had those kinds of alerts before during bad flu seasons, so no one paid much attention. That same morning, a guest came down with a fever in the Timberline Lodge, room 213. A snowboarder from Florida named Jeremy Lannister, 23, good health, no pre-existing conditions. The front desk called her in when he became disoriented and aggressive with the housekeeping staff. Said he kept asking for his sister, who wasn't even on the guest list. When our medical staff arrived, he had locked himself in the bathroom and refused to come out. I was called in because I knew how to handle panicked guests. Military training has that effect. When I finally got the door open, using my badge as a wedge and a maintenance tool for leverage, I saw blood smeared along the mirror and sink. Jeremy sat in the corner on the tile, mumbling incoherently, eyes unfocused. No visible injuries, just a sickly grey tint to his skin. He refused water, flinched from light. I called down to security and told them to initiate the standard infectious disease response. We had an old quarantine protocol, mostly for norovirus outbreaks or bad flu seasons, but it gave us a playbook. Jeremy was moved to the med wing in the basement of the staff building. That's when things started unraveling. By the end of that day, 5 more guests complained of fever, chills, and confusion. All had visited the Summit Cafe on the morning of the 9th. Our food and beverage director shut the place down. The resort managers told us to stay calm, not to say anything alarming to guests. Standard corporate response: contain first, explain later. That night, 2 of the sick guests vanished from their rooms. At first, we thought they'd wandered off disoriented. The blizzard rolling in didn't help. Visibility dropped to 30 feet. Lifts were closed. Snowcats couldn't safely search the tree lines. I was paired with Sophia Kim, another patroller and former EMT. We headed up to the ridge using snowmobiles, scanning for thermal signatures and following tracks we found in the snow near the eastern slope. We didn't find either missing guest, but we did find something else. Just past Ridge Point 5, we saw a deer tangled in a section of fallen avalanche netting. Its fur was missing in patches, chunks of it, torn away like something had bitten it repeatedly. Its neck was snapped, but not by a fall. The vertebrae looked twisted, crushed, like someone had wrung it out by hand. Sophia took one look and muttered something I couldn't hear over the wind. Then she pulled her radio and asked for clearance to return. Whatever had happened out here, it didn't feel right. I didn't say a word, just nodded. We left the deer where it lay, took photos and logged coordinates, but I never sent those photos in. The next morning, we lost contact with the staff building. I don't mean the radios were fuzzy or the signals dropped out. I mean nothing. No voices, no tones, no channel interference. As if the entire structure had vanished from the map. I snowshoed down with Sophia around 6 a.m., trying to check in manually. The Medwing's windows were all frosted over from the inside, doors locked tight, no response to banging or shouting. I checked the side utility access using my master key and finally got in. That smell hit us like a wall. Disinfectant, blood, something sour beneath it, like the metal stench of old coins soaked in spit. The lights inside were flickering. A radio handset lay on the floor, cord stretched as if torn from the wall. The nurse's station was empty. Doors to the exam rooms hung open. We moved slowly, calling out names. No one answered. And then we heard the dragging. From the hallway near the boiler room, something was moving, uneven, shuffling. Sophia held her ice axe like a weapon. I had my utility flashlight and a flare gun, which suddenly felt about as useful as a spoon in a firefight. What came around the corner wasn't Jeremy Lannister. Not anymore. His lower jaw hung crookedly, skin stretched and torn near the hinge. His hands were scraped raw, like he'd been clawing at cement. His eyes weren't wild or confused. They were blank, dead. And yet he was moving toward us, slowly, with awful intent. We froze. Not out of fear, not entirely, but because we couldn't make sense of what we were seeing. Then he bolted. It wasn't slow. 1 second he was dragging a foot like something from a B-movie, and the next he was on all fours, launching himself at us like a starving animal. I fired the flare gun by instinct. It struck his shoulder and lit up in a burst of phosphorescent red. He didn't scream. He didn't stop. He just kept coming, even as the fire seared his coat. Sophia hit him full force with the axe. The first swing caught his collarbone. The second one dropped him. But even then, he didn't stop moving. His limbs spasmed, fingers curling toward us as if reaching for our ankles. We backed out of the building, locked the access door, and didn't speak for a long time. Not until we were back on the ridge, wind battering our faces and radios useless in the static. That was day 2. The resort issued a general advisory. A severe flu strain was spreading among guests and staff. All lifts were closed indefinitely. Guests were asked to remain in their rooms. Staff were told to avoid contact and await instructions from the Summit County Health Office. That morning, I stood in the gondola station, watching the empty cabins sway gently in the wind. Normally, we'd be getting a line of skiers by sunrise. Families, snowboarders, couples with GoPros strapped to their helmets. Now the entire plaza looked like a postcard from a ghost town. The blizzard hadn't let up. Wind chill had dropped to -15, and we still had no confirmation from the CDC or local authorities, just a recorded message that repeated every 30 minutes if you called the emergency line. By midday, we had 2 confirmed fatalities in the staff building. 1 security guard, 1 kitchen supervisor. Both had deep lacerations and blood loss consistent with violent assault, according to Sophia. I don't know how she kept it together when she relayed that over the radio, but she did. Management held a meeting in the event center around 2 p.m. All team leads were ordered to attend in person. I remember walking in and counting just 8 people, out of the usual 30. The resort director, Alan Brewer, stood at the front of the conference room with a clipboard and a pale face. He looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. "We are in a containment situation," he said. "This is a biohazard event. We've received word that federal response teams are en route, but due to the storm and possible airspace restrictions, they've been delayed." I asked what we were supposed to do in the meantime. Brewer avoided eye contact. "Keep the guests calm. Secure exterior doors. Block access to common areas. If anyone exhibits violent symptoms, do not approach. Alert security." It was a death sentence, and we all knew it. We weren't trained for this. None of us were wearing protective gear. Half the staff didn't show up to their shifts after that meeting. A few tried to sneak down the mountain in their own vehicles, but the access road was under 3 feet of drifted snow. The only way out was by air, and no chopper was coming through this storm. That night, Sophia and I patrolled the upper lodges, checking for stragglers and relaying updates through the emergency band on our portable radios. Around 9:40 p.m., We picked up a faint distress signal on Channel 6. It was coming from the Alpine Suite, the highest elevation building at Summit Peak, mostly private rooms for VIPs. The voice was hard to make out at first. Male, panicked, speaking too fast. Tried to break through the door. I locked the bathroom. They got her first. Don't know what to do. Then a sharp thud, something heavy hitting wood. A cry, more static. We raced up to the suites, cutting across the trail system on snowmobiles. The upper ridge was pitch black. Power had failed sometime after sunset, and backup generators were unreliable at best. By the time we reached the Alpine building, everything was silent. We found the radio in room 408, sitting beside a smashed phone and an untouched breakfast tray. The room was empty. The mattress had been flipped. Bloody smears ran along the bathroom tiles and into the hallway. No bodies. We followed the stains all the way to the fire escape. That was the first time I saw one of them feeding. It knelt by a broken railing at the edge of the slope, hunched over something that had once been human. Its back moved in slow jerks. Steam rose from its neck into the cold night air. I couldn't see its face, but I saw the way its shoulders twitched, the way it pressed downward like an animal protecting its kill. We didn't make a sound. We just backed away, inch by inch, then turned and moved until our boots hit the ice of the slope. That thing never followed. It just stayed there, locked in whatever grotesque ritual it had begun. Back at the command center, Sophia wrote everything down. I think she needed to get it out of her head. I just stared at the map of the resort taped to the wall. Every lodge, every access point, every trail. We had 6 buildings still occupied by guests. 1 kitchen still operating under emergency rations. No reliable transport. No working med wing. And no confirmation from the outside world that they even knew what was happening up here. The next morning, we found the first barricade. It was made from ski racks, patio furniture, and 3 snowboards nailed across the main entrance to Cedar View Lodge. Someone had spray-painted, "Do not come in infected inside," across the glass. I called it in. Brewer told me to leave it alone. If they're infected, we don't want to spread it further, he said. Let them contain themselves. It wasn't until later that we found out the guests inside had barricaded someone else in the basement. An employee. A dishwasher named Mark Torres, who'd shown signs of aggression. According to a note left at the concierge desk, they'd locked him downstairs with a case of water and a lantern. The note ended with, "Sorry, Mark." I argued for hours to let him out. Brewer refused. So Sophia and I made a choice. We waited until the blizzard thinned just enough to move unseen, then cut around the back of the building through the maintenance tunnel. It took us over an hour to clear a path. The whole time we kept hearing footsteps above us, shuffling back and forth in the upper halls. Some quick, some slow, none of them right. We reached the basement. The door was blocked from the outside with a folding chair and 2 ski poles jammed through the handles. Sophia knocked once. Nothing. Then again. A faint sound. Scraping, like shoes on concrete. I pulled the poles free and opened the door slowly. Mark was crouched in the corner, shaking. His arms were scratched and bleeding, his eyes wild, his lips blistered. But he was aware. He recognized us. He sobbed when we opened a protein bar and handed it to him. He wasn't infected. Not yet. We got him to the old security shed near the back trail. Gave him space, food, blankets. Checked him every few hours. By sunrise, he was asleep, curled under a ski parka. We thought we'd saved him. That hope didn't last 24 hours. Mark stopped speaking by nightfall. He stopped blinking. Stopped eating. Just sat there in the dark, staring at the wall. And the next morning, he was gone. No forced door, no broken glass. Just gone. Tracks led out into the trees, barefoot, blood in the snow. But that wasn't the worst part. At 2:14 a.m., Sophia checked the security camera we'd rigged above the door, and we saw it. Mark stood at the edge of the tree line, looking back at the shed. He was upright, still, arms slack. But there was something behind him, something moving just past the limit of the night vision range. When Sophia froze the footage, you could just make out outlines, figures, not animals. Human shapes, but not walking. They swayed gently in the wind, like trees in a storm, but they weren't reacting to the cold. They weren't shifting for warmth. They were just there, dozens, maybe more. I don't know what made it worse, their stillness or the sense that they were letting him go, letting him leave, and watching to see where he went. Sophia wanted to leave immediately, head back to the central lodge and warn the others, but I made us wait until daylight. Something about those shadows. They weren't just standing around. It felt coordinated, controlled. By morning, the tracks in the snow were gone. Wind had erased everything, even the blood. We packed what we could and left the shed behind. Neither of us looked back. The main lodge had turned into a fortress. Guests had started breaking into supply closets, dragging out whatever furniture they could to block windows. Someone had turned the fireplace tools into makeshift weapons. A few of the kitchen staff had been handing out dry cereal and crackers, rationing what was left without waiting for management orders. Alan Brewer was gone. No one had seen him since the night before. His room was empty. Radio was left on the charger. A single chair knocked over. No signs of a struggle, just the eerie sense that he'd slipped out without a word. No one volunteered to go looking. That afternoon, I did a sweep of the lower trails with a kid named Ezra, one of the younger ski techs who'd stayed behind to help. We carried radios, bear spray, and flare guns. Neither of us said much. Halfway down the northeast ridge, we found a lift chair dangling sideways. The cable line was intact, but something had forced the chair into a spin, violently enough to twist the safety bar sideways. There were claw marks on the seat cushion, not from an animal, not from gear. Deep scrapes, like fingers. Ezra took one look and muttered, "This ain't right." It was the first time anyone had said it out loud. We made it back just before dusk. A group of guests had taken over the top floor lounge and moved mattresses against the elevator doors. Someone had started a notebook, recording sightings, times, numbers. I flipped through it briefly, page after page of the same word, outside. They were being seen more frequently, near the parking lot, on the access road, even halfway up the ski school slope. No howling, no groaning. Just silent silhouettes, faces unclear, shapes still, then gone. That night, Sophia heard something on the roof. We were bunking in one of the old rental offices, glass walls facing the tree line. Around midnight, she shook me awake, finger to her lips. I followed her out into the hallway. The sound was soft, metal flexing under weight, slow, deliberate footfalls. We crept down the stairwell and out through the emergency exit to the side lot. Snow crunched underfoot, masking some of the noise. I turned off my headlamp. That's when we saw them. 3 of them, standing just beyond the edge of the emergency floodlights. Their skin looked frostbitten, almost translucent under the moon. Their faces were slack, lips cracked and blackened. One had half an ear, another's lower jaw hung loose, crooked to one side. And they didn't move. Not when we opened the door, not when we stepped outside, just stood there, as if they were listening. I raised my flare gun, but Sophia stopped me, and I understood why. They weren't attacking. They weren't even approaching. They were observing. And then, slowly, almost in sync, they turned and walked away. Down the slope, toward the blackened forest, like the show was over. I've seen combat. I've seen panic, blood, and desperation. But nothing has unnerved me like the control those things had, the restraint. It made me feel like we weren't in charge of anything anymore, like we were livestock, and the fences just hadn't failed yet. The following morning, we heard from the outside world, barely. A scratchy voice on Channel 3, repeating a message on loop. It was military protocol, FEMA code, a partial evacuation order for Eagle County, references to Stage 4 containment breach and vector persistence in cold regions, then a list of safe zones, none of them near us. I tried calling back. No response. The guests were restless. One man attempted to leave on skis, convinced he could make it down the service road to the nearest town. His name was Eric Mendez, school teacher from Albuquerque. We watched him through binoculars from the north deck. He made it about half a mile. Then the trees moved. We didn't see what happened exactly. One minute he was gliding past a drift, the next his skis stopped. He didn't fall, he froze. His body stiffened as if something unseen had grabbed him. And then he vanished backward, into the trees. No sound, no struggle. Gone. That's when I gave the order to barricade the final exit. The resort had officially become a dead zone. No more outside patrols. No more searches. No more rescues. Anyone not inside by sundown wouldn't be let in. It was the hardest thing I've ever said into a radio, and I had to say it twice. That night we started burning the bodies. We'd recovered 5 from the staff wing and 2 more from the guest rooms, people who had clearly turned. Some were unrecognizable. One woman was found curled in a closet, bite marks along her arms. Another had hanged herself with a power cord, leaving a note written in eyeliner. "It's in the air, we're already dead." I didn't believe that part, not yet. The fire pit was dug near the snowcat garage, away from the main lodge. It took 2 cans of kerosene and a half-burned trail map to get it going. We stood around that fire as the sky turned purple, and the wind picked up. The smoke didn't rise, it clung low, like fog. I couldn't stop staring at the shapes as they burned. The way the flesh collapsed inward, the way the bones hissed. No one spoke. Until one of the guests, an older guy with a ranger's voice, pointed at the ridge. "There," he said. We all turned. At the top of the slope, perfectly silhouetted against the dusk, stood 5 figures. No one moved. Not us, not them. They just stood there, motionless in the growing dark. The wind whipped snow between us, but they didn't flinch, didn't react, just observed. As if the flames were something familiar, something expected. I couldn't make out details from that distance. The shapes were human mostly, shoulders slumped, arms limp at their sides, but their heads were tilted too far, off axis, like broken dolls waiting for a signal. One of them stepped forward, just slightly, and we all tensed. Then they turned, one by one, and drifted back into the trees, not hurried, not afraid, as if they knew they had all the time in the world. We doused the fire and cleared out. The snowcat garage was sealed tight. That became our fallback point. Concrete walls, no windows, backup generator in the rear. I put 3 people on overnight watch. We rotated in shifts, but no one really slept. Inside the lodge, it was getting harder to maintain order. There were close to 80 people still uninfected. Guests, staff, a few kids. The power had gone in 2 of the upper floors. No heating. Most people crowded around the fireplaces or wrapped themselves in ski gear. Some still believed rescue was coming. I didn't argue. If people needed hope to stay rational, let them have it. But deep down, I was already making decisions with the assumption that help wouldn't come. That this, us, trapped in a luxury resort, surrounded by something we didn't understand, was the new plan. That night, I met with Sophia and 2 others, Carmen, one of the kitchen staff, and Victor, a Serbian lift mechanic who'd survived an avalanche 3 years prior and hadn't spoken more than 50 words since. We reviewed the blueprints of the resort. Every tunnel, sub-basement, heating duct, laundry chute. If those things decided to push inside, it wouldn't take long. "We need to seal the tunnels," Sophia said. "Start with the old maintenance crawl space." She was right. It led straight into the laundry wing, barely used in the off-season. If something figured out the layout, if it hadn't already, we'd be overrun in minutes. Victor and I took a welding torch, plywood, and a set of steel bars down just before dawn. The crawl space was narrow, barely wide enough for 1 person at a time. Cold, damp, air smelled stale. Every few feet our flashlights picked up old mouse droppings, dried footprints in the dust, some from us, others too fresh. We sealed it. But as we were leaving, I heard a sound behind the wall. Breathing, not steady, not healthy. A rasp like air dragged through a cracked pipe. I pressed my ear to the panel. For a second I thought it was just the wind, until something scraped the other side. Fingernails, or claws. It traced along the wood, slowly. Victor lit the torch. We left in silence, welded the last point shut, and didn't speak of it again. On day 6, we lost radio contact with the outside entirely. No static, no signal, just dead silence on all channels. The satellite phones stopped working that afternoon. We tried rebooting the backup systems, repositioning the dish on the roof. Carmen and I climbed up with a signal meter and thermal gear. Clear skies, no ice buildup. Nothing should have blocked the dish, except it was blocked. It had been turned, manually, facing downward into the slope. There were prints in the snow around it, bare feet, long narrow strides, heavier than they should have been, deeper than someone barefoot would leave in that temperature. Carmen whispered something in Spanish and backed away. I followed, watching the tree line. That night, we initiated the blackout protocol. All lights off, no fires, no movement after dark. We covered the windows, stuffed towels under doors. It felt like we were waiting for something. Or more accurately, it felt like they were waiting for us. Guests started whispering about the cold doing something to the infected. How it slowed them down at first, but now they seemed stronger in it. Faster, more aware. Some claimed they could smell movement. Others swore they heard voices in the woods, just beyond the reach of firelight. I didn't dismiss any of it. The cold was more than weather. It was becoming part of them. Sophia and I ran regular checks on the perimeter. We found fewer tracks each day, but more signs of intrusion. Tools missing from the maintenance shed, a crowbar left wedged in a vent, broken glass in the equipment room. They weren't just wandering anymore. They were probing, testing. On the night of day 7, one got in. A girl. She was maybe 16. Long black hair, no ID, no pass, no guest record. We found her crouched in the hallway near the north wing, her hands dripping, eyes glassy. She looked at us like she didn't see us, like we were noise. When Victor reached for her arm, she lunged, head first. Biting, no hesitation. He threw her off. She hissed. No other word for it. She hissed. Sophia tased her. Nothing. Carmen hit her with a steel tray. Only when we pinned her with a coat rack and locked her in the stairwell did she stop moving. But even then she didn't scream. She didn't ask for help. She just kept tapping, her fingers against the concrete, a rhythm, like code. She died 4 hours later, or at least stopped. No pulse, no breath. We buried her in the gear locker, double-locked it, sandbags on top. The next morning she was gone. No broken door, no footprints, just gone. Same pattern again. Something watching us, learning us. We weren't just facing the infected, we were being studied. On day 8, I tried something desperate. I went outside alone, just before sunrise. No radio, no flare gun, just my jacket, ice axe, and a whistle. I walked toward the edge of the slope, stopped near the snow fence, and waited. Nothing, just wind, frost creeping into my gloves. But then, I heard it. Not a growl, not a snarl, a whisper, from the woods. I couldn't understand the words. Maybe there weren't any. Maybe it was just breath and wind and fear mixing together, but it felt directed, intentional. Behind the whisper I could hear footsteps, light, deliberate, dozens. I turned and walked back. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to show I wasn't afraid. I don't know why that mattered to me, but it did. Back at the lodge, I didn't tell the others what I'd heard. Not at first. It felt like speaking it aloud would give it more power, like it would turn whispers into something solid, something real. I just went back to work, checking barricades, running ration counts, keeping warm bodies near the center halls. We had just over 60 people left. 2 were running fevers. We isolated them in the old spa wing, but I knew what was coming. One of them, a guest named Dana, had a bite on her calf. She said she fell, cut it on her bindings, but the shape wasn't right. Teeth leave patterns. These left arcs. Sophia took over the spa watch. She volunteered, wouldn't take no for an answer. She kept her axe with her. And her radio. Around midnight, I heard her voice, clearer than I'd heard anyone's in days. "They're not coming for the bodies," she said. "They're coming for us." I asked what she meant. She didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, "I think it's the cold. I think it teaches them." The line went dead. I ran to the spa wing. She was alive, standing in the hallway, breathing hard, eyes locked on the door. Inside, Dana was gone. The window had shattered from the inside. Snow blew across the tile floor. The second patient, a man named Ellis, was still on the cot. No bite marks, no wounds, just gone. Like his body had given up, emptied out. We checked the security feed. Both had risen at the same time, stood still for almost 10 minutes. Then Dana climbed out the window. Ellis walked calmly into the service closet, shut the door behind him, and never came out. Like they knew where to go next. That was the last footage we got. Power grid blew the next morning. A transformer near the upper generator popped and lit up the ridge with a burst of orange. That was day 9. The lodge was plunged into complete blackout. No lights, no heat, just the wind howling through the old timber and the occasional creak of shifting snow on the roof. We consolidated everyone into the ballroom. Cots, blankets, emergency lanterns. I gave each group a job: fire watch, food patrol, perimeter checks. Not because it would save us, but because it gave people something to do. Idle minds don't survive long in the dark. That night, I took Bailey, the resort's search and rescue dog, for a perimeter walk. She was old, 15 at least, German shepherd with fading vision, but a better nose than most humans. She stopped halfway to the north door and growled, low, constant. Her tail didn't wag. I shined my flashlight ahead. The snow looked undisturbed, but something was there. A line of footprints, perfectly straight, like a file, dozens deep, leading up to the wall of the lodge, but not away. They'd come right to us, then vanished. That was the night the silence changed. You could feel it in the building, like air thickened, like the walls had started listening. People whispered about dreams, shared ones, of being pulled through the snow, of standing at the tree line, part of the silent mass, of seeing themselves walking into the dark, step by step, barefoot and smiling. I didn't sleep, neither did Sophia. At dawn, we found Victor on the roof. I don't know what woke me exactly. Maybe the absence of sound. No coughing from the ballroom. No clink of someone shifting cutlery near the camp stove. No low voices trading theories over stale coffee. Just a hollow quiet, so pure and unnatural it practically rang in my ears. The sky outside had that deep pre-dawn indigo, the kind that makes snow glow faintly even without sunlight. Cold, like glass. I stepped out of the ballroom with Bailey at my side. Her ears were low, her paws cautious against the tile. I remember thinking it felt too still, like a theater after closing, where the curtains never reopened. Sophia met me at the stairwell with a look that didn't need explanation. "Roof," she said, and nothing else. We climbed up slowly. The maintenance access ladder was already frosted over, ice crystals catching the dim light of my headlamp in soft white shimmers. At the top, the hatch was already open. Wind pushed down through the gap, bringing with it a strange biting scent, like copper and smoke that had frozen mid-air. Then we saw him. Victor stood near the center of the roof, maybe 2 feet from the edge. No jacket, no gloves, just a torn grey sweater clinging to his narrow frame, sleeves flapping gently in the wind. His jeans were soaked up to the knees, bare feet planted firm on the ice-glazed shingles. It was 17 degrees below zero, but he stood as if he were in the sun, relaxed, arms hanging at his sides. His posture didn't carry fear or pain or even confusion. It was reverent. I called out his name, gently at first, unsure if he was conscious. He didn't flinch, just stood there, eyes focused on the tree line far below, on the sea of white and dark where the forest met the snow basin. I took a few steps closer. The roof creaked. I held Bailey back. She growled once, then stopped, watching him with her ears tucked and tail flat. Victor turned his head slowly, eyes dull but not vacant. There was something else in them. Not joy, not terror, relief. His face was soft, lips dry and pale but curled into the faintest smile. That was what haunted me most. That expression, like someone who had finally remembered something important after years of forgetting. And then he spoke. "It's warmer out there," he said. His voice didn't tremble. It didn't crack or plead or shiver. It was steady, like he believed it, like it was a fact he had learned and accepted. Then, before either of us could move, he stepped forward. One motion. No scream. No hesitation. Just the crunch of snow, the brief scrape of his heel on the ice, and then the vanishing sound of his body dropping into the white void beyond the edge. We rushed to the side and looked down. He landed near the old loading bay, body crumpled, limbs bent in a way no one survives. The impact left a jagged imprint in the drift, red blooming out into the white like spilled ink. Sophia turned away, arms wrapped tight around herself. Bailey whimpered once, then went still again. I stared at Victor for a long time, not because I expected movement, but because even in death, his face held that same strange peace, that faint, almost grateful smile. We carried him inside with help from two of the guests. We didn't speak during the process, only gestures, small nods. It was like we were all waiting for someone else to make the call. When it came time to decide what to do with him, I reached for the kerosene by instinct. It had become our ritual. Burn the body, kill whatever might still linger inside. But when I looked down at him, I stopped. I couldn't do it. None of us could. Because something about that smile made burning him feel wrong. So we buried him instead. Behind the snowcat garage, beneath 4 feet of frozen dirt and packed powder, we used broken chairlift parts for markers, said nothing resembling a prayer, and walked away before the sun had fully broken through the clouds. By the time we returned to the lodge, the day had changed. Day 10, the storm was gone. For the first time in over a week, the skies were clear, not just patches, completely open. The sun reflected off the snow like a mirror, too bright to look at directly. The air was calm, still razor-sharp with cold but peaceful. Someone cried when they saw the sun, and then, faint, distant, we heard it, a chopper. No one said anything. We all just stopped what we were doing and tilted our heads toward the sound. The blades were unmistakable, not wind, not imagination. We stepped out onto the deck, shielding our eyes. It was flying far to the north, maybe a mile out, heading along the ridgeline, not slowing, not scanning, no search pattern, no flare response. It passed right by. No one waved. No one ran for the flares. Because we knew. That helicopter wasn't for us. Whoever was flying it either didn't know we were still here, or worse, they did and had orders not to stop. And somehow, that hit harder than the rest. Not the monsters. Not the cold. The silence. Like we'd been written off. By noon, the whispers returned. But they didn't come from the woods. They came from inside. At first, it was just the maintenance guy, Alex, who heard it while restocking propane cans near the boiler room. He said it was like breathing. Deep and slow. Rhythmic. Not mechanical. Not the hissing of the furnace. Something alive. Then 2 of the guests swore they heard footsteps in the west hallway, the spa wing we'd locked down days earlier. Doors shut, no access. But the motion sensors lit up one by one, like someone was walking through. No cameras worked anymore. Later, someone swore they heard laughing in the kitchen walls. Not a voice, not words, just the shape of laughter. Like a shadow of it, echoing faintly through the metal pipes. I didn't ask if it was real. At that point, I didn't need it to be, because I knew what came next. I packed my things, not all of them, just a radio, 3 flares, a notebook, and Bailey's leash. I told Sophia I was going for the communications tower, the one on the East Ridge, past the old gondola station. It had a backup repeater, long range, might punch through. She didn't ask me not to go. She just handed me her axe. I made it halfway before I saw them again, not just 5, not even dozens, hundreds, all gathered in the basin below the ridge, standing in the snow, arms slack, eyes open. They didn't move, didn't speak, but they were waiting. I didn't go any farther. I'm writing this now from the ski patrol hut near the summit, one of the few buildings still untouched. Bailey's curled beside me. She hasn't barked once, just watches the door. I don't know what happens tomorrow. I don't know if this is the end. But if anyone finds this, if you're somewhere warm, somewhere safe, do not go outside. The cold belongs to them now, and they're patient. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.